Welcome to Terry's Talks. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about educating the whole child. If a peer were to share their impressions of me professionally, I believe that they would say I'm a passionate, innovative, I think outside of the box, care about kids, and what is in the best interest of the whole child. I think that I have come by this naturally, being a part of a very large family and a large community of learners for the last for learners, 32 years, but I've been part of the big family for 55. Alfie Kohn once said, "We can't value only what is easy to measure. Measurable outcomes may be the least important results of learning." I believe this to mean what is on the outside is not always what is inside and represented. My mom used to wrap gifts so dramatically. It would take 15 minutes to open a box because she had it taped so elaborately. And then once you got the paper finally off of the present, the box would represent nothing a 7-year-old would ever ask for. My mom would notice my face and say, "Remember, what's on the outside isn't always on the inside." She was right. I believe that as educators, we need to educate the whole child, meaning where are they in their development, learning style, how is their emotional development progressing or not, and finally, do they have perspective on culture and diversity? It is a complicated mindset, yet an appropriate perspective to have on very impressionable developing minds. When my daughter was 2, my brother and his wife had just returned from Gabon, Africa. They were in the Peace Corps. They came to visit us and were so excited to see my daughter because the last time they saw her, she was a newborn. One morning, they were both playing with her and her little stove, kitchen, sink kind of toy, which had a toaster. She asked them what they wanted for breakfast. You might say her language was very developed by her age. My sister-in-law said, "I would like some toast," and step on it. Well, sure enough, my daughter placed the rubber bread into the pretend toaster and stepped on it. It is important for us as educators to realize that depending on where a child is in their development, they can be very literal in their interpretation of language. As educators, I also believe that we need to understand what learning style children have. This needs to be probed over time. Children need to have opportunities to show what they know in a multitude of facets. McAdams and Powles in 2006 offer a 5-principle model of the whole person. Learning style falls into dispositional traits and characteristic adaptations, where there are differences across individual humans, but there are groupings of humans who have common or similar learning style characteristics. I remember one of my first opportunities I had to visit a child with autism in his general education classroom in the job that I have now. His teacher was frustrated because he was always off task, making noises and distracting his peers, while she was trying to instruct them. She would go to his desk and begin to bark demands at him to stop what he was doing and listen to her. In my observation of him, it was as though he did not hear anything she was saying. When I finished my observation, I had the opportunity to meet with her and share my thoughts and recommendations about what he was doing and how he was responding to her instructional practices with him. I shared with her the learning styles of many students with autism. I based my ideas off of what I observed about her student during instruction. I brought with me many types of visual supports. I shared with her a mini task strip that represented the routine they were going to be following during her instruction. It had 3 visuals, and then the last visual implied that they would be finished. I asked her to share it with him before she started teaching. I asked her to add a visual that represented a highly preferred activity. I also told her that she would have to use this for a while before she might see any changes in his behavior. She emailed me 3 days later to tell me that it was the best thing ever and that he had completed more than 50% of his work over the next several days since my visit. Another key factor in educating a child is consideration of their emotional development. It is difficult to help teachers and other educators understand that not everyone develops at the same rate, let alone emotionally at the same rate. Also, children do not come to school hoping to rock your world in the wrong direction. They just weren't wired emotionally. At least wired in that they could handle their own emotions. It needs to progress and develop, and sometimes it stays in the same place for a long time. When I was in 3rd grade, my family had just moved back to the U.S. from Scotland. My sister and I were in the same grade, but she was a year younger than me. We started 1st grade together in Scotland because they did not have kindergarten in the public school there. Believe me, for the first several years of school, it was okay to be treated like a twin. You know, wearing the same outfits, looking identical, which in the 70s meant a lot of patent leather stuff. But we were definitely not twins. I hated that I was always compared to her. In 3rd grade, the teachers at the Catholic school thought that we needed psychological testing for some reason. Not sure why. After all of the testing, my sister and my parents and I went to the psychologist's office to hear the results. They pointed to my sister and said, "Beth, now she is not working up to her full potential. She could definitely do better. And Terri, well, she's just average. Just plain average." So as you can see, that kind of stayed with me even to this day. Even to the point where I push myself to try to do what's right for kids so that they won't feel the way I felt. Cultural and diversity are key factors for considering when educating children. Again, the perspective of what's on the outside is not always what is on the inside comes to mind. Developing relationships with children and families is key in all areas, but most important in this area. I can remember one of my first years teaching in the public school, I was in a classroom with 8 students and 2 other adults. Most of the students had very significant learning challenges. One of my students needed sneakers in the worst way. I was trying to figure out the best way to get him shoes without insulting his mother. She knew many families in her neighborhood and had a lot of connections, if you know what I mean. Finally, one day, I just called her. I said to her that my son had several pairs of sneakers and pants that he had outgrown, and did she know of anyone who might need them in her neighborhood? She said, "Yes, of course, my son does." I told her that I'd send them home that day and that they could try on whatever they needed to try on. And if something didn't work out, they could share it with other kids in the neighborhood. My parents always taught me that respect was the most important feeling a person needed to have when interacting with other people. It mattered where people came from. It mattered who and what they were. It is best practice to be caring and empathetic, however, never accept underachievement. While we need to consider diversity in culture, we also need to keep in mind that we hold the same standards for all students. Finally, I will close with this thought from Gretchen McAllister and Jacqueline Jordan Irvine, 2002. The caring teacher will be more successful if she approaches her goal of holding all students to the same rigorous standards by seeking first to understand where her students are. Thanks, and have a great night.